I'm Brittany Young. I'm the founder and CEO of B360. I was inspired to start B360 in 2015, post Freddie Gray. I noticed two big reports in Baltimore. One showing that we had over 120,000 STEM careers that could move communities forward out of poverty based on mid level skills where you don't need a degree, which I agreed. But I didn't see a way of people that are from Baltimore to identify with STEM. And that was a pain point. Then the second thing with those reports was also people saying we need more police and community interactions and creating a dirt bike police task force. And while I agreed we needed Baltimore to be more safe and I wanted riders to be out of traffic, I didn't think the only thing we could do was incarcerate or have a task force. And so out of that frustration, B360 was birthed. And also at the same time, having one of my little brothers go to jail and be incarcerated, a 16-year-old. So I'm against any solution that results in Black and Brown people going to jail for nonviolent offenses without there at least being some type of programming. And so instead of just waiting for the city to create programming, out of the frustration and the anger came B360. So, as we know, in every major city across the US, Baltimore, Miami, Cleveland, Detroit, Chicago, list can go on, people ride dirt bikes in streets and traffic because, unlike skateboarding and unlike bicycling, we don't have safe spaces. When it first started in the 70s, people were actually riding the parks, but then state laws passed by the mid 2000s and that forced people into traffic. And that's kind of where like some of those like head button opportunities came. But for Black kids in cities, specifically Baltimore, I'm talking about myself. When I think about my summer, when I think about my upbringing, I think about going to Druid Hill with my cousins, with my family. Think of setting up like a cookout and then watching dirt bike riders go past you, doing tricks, doing stunts, and having like hundreds of people outside just enjoying like a calm Sunday, right? So when I think about the culture of dirt bike riding, one, I'm thinking about dirt bike riding is as much part of Baltimore as I am, or it's the Snowball or Crabs and Old Bay. Two, I'm thinking about my experience as a Black person in this city that I could never imagine not hearing it. But then I'm thinking about me getting older and wanting to be more safe and wanting them to have their own space and their own productivity. And then lastly, I'm thinking about the culture and what it stands for. So most people don't know that dirt bike riding, when you do a dirt bike at 12 o'clock, so that means bikes up, guns down. A lot of riders believe that you do dirt bikes so that you don't have kids and young adults go into street life and gang life. And if you talk to a lot of riders, right, we know that Baltimore is stressed, and that's why we can have high crime and high incarceration. But two, for riders, they see it as escape and a relief to that stress. So I always ask people if it's something that you love to do and it may be criminal, but it helps you escape and helps you not go into the street life, wouldn't you still do it? So for me, I think about dirt bikes as an easy entry point into one, understanding different people, acknowledging Black voice and identity. Two, something that can be, can be dangerous, but can be used as a tool for education, film, motorsports, and more. So I chose to go into STEM. When I was young, like pre-K and kindergarten. I knew everything about like how to write in cursive. I was reading chapter books in pre-K and I was very bored in school. And so I used to get into a lot of trouble. Um, all of my teachers kicked me out of class every day. And I had my desk right next to my principal's office. And then one day, I think I was in first grade, I watched Bill Nye the Science Guy, and he was making stuff explode. And I was like, yep, that's what I want to do. Because I liked the thrill. I liked like anything that he was doing with explosions. It was like it caught my attention right easily. My parents got me a chemistry set. I found that chemistry set about 3 years ago. It was actually for teachers. And so I was this first grader with a chemistry set for teachers. I was doing all kinds of crazy science experiments. Like one I did, I ended up not having any eyebrows because of the heat from the explosion I created. I created like extreme polymers where I used to glue my sister to the chair. I would glue people that was in my classes to the chair. And I also created like stink bombs and that kind of stuff, but they were like really nasty stink bombs. And so when I think about like STEM and I think about engineering and why I went into that field, I just thought about all of the cognitive reasoning skills that I had really early on and young. And that was the thing that caught my attention the most and kind of like honed me in. And then it keeps translating. So I'm still in engineering today, but the way that I engineer is to solve problems around like social economic development, resources, and how to best move B360 forward. I've also been in education, so still thinking about problem solving, but from the lens of like a teacher or in community college. So what inspired me, I always tell people, I think everyone knows I'm from Baltimore, but I always say born, raised, and never leaving, right? Meaning that I believe in order to make change, while I've traveled a lot, I've been everywhere around the country and the world. I'm always going to be Black and from Baltimore. And so, if I want my kids, my generation, the ones before me and after me to experience freedoms, I have to fight for it. And I have to position myself and my org so that we can grow that. And again, I remember just being in the same position as my students of being unheard, not listened to, and wishing that someone could see the value in me. And where we differ was I, like a lot of first grade students in Baltimore City Public Schools, you don't get the most resources, but in turn, I've always been a person that just never listened. And then I got to become who I had. So by the time I was in third grade, I had my first Black teacher, Miss Taylor. Miss Taylor was the first teacher that ever asked me why I was in trouble, what I like to do. And when I went into like education, I got to be that person for my students of seeing the beauty, the uniqueness, the ingenuity, the skill set, and really wanting to make sure they knew how smart they already were. Because you get tired of hearing the same facade about Baltimore that it's not talent here, it's not smart people. No, we're right in front of everyone's faces. It's just a lot of times people don't have like that lens of love to see how brilliant we already are. And so that's really what keeps fueling me. Even when things are hard and challenging, I believe in our work because I believe in our people and I believe in really myself. And I believe that I'm no different from the students and youth that we serve. It's just really making sure we value that space, that opinions, that opportunities. Being a Black woman in STEM, tech, philanthropy, business, the world has not been conducive to my growth, but it's something I already knew well before I got into business. So I would say some of my pain points, and I'll talk about philanthropy first, is like there are great groups like the Casey Foundation that are being more proactive and open minded about reshaping philanthropy. But some of the pain points are typical as a Black led organization. We see less funding than white led organizations, and that's a reality I live. While we can do great work, have great stories, have great outcomes, people's own biases against either me, the work that we do, who we serve, also cause a deficit in our funding. And you can get tired of having those same conversations and those no's, but I'm always willing to keep working past it because I believe in the work that we do and the people we serve. Another pain point is usually the narrative around dirt bike riders. So we've done a good job of really showing people that dirt bike riding is not monolithic, that there are people, who may do things the wrong way, but bike life and gun life are not synonymous. But some of the pain points always come when people revert back to those same typical stories, which are stereotypes of black and brown men and boys, of them selling drugs, carrying guns, etc. And so very early on, for sure, that was a huge pain point. And even now, with all of the awards and accolades, we will still go certain places in this country. And that is the first thing people think about. And so I would say the underlying theme though is really just like biases and racism. I think the world is shifting now, which I'm glad, but I'm also not really sure of how many people have to die. And I don't really want Black people to keep suffering and dying before we can finally get, money and funding. And so my pain points are really around philanthropy, storytelling, stereotypes, and really wanting people to know you can do impact work where you don't have to have the savior mantra. You can see people as assets in communities. And while funding, you may not understand why something works because it's not your cultural makeup. You can understand that it does, and that's good enough to invest into it. And that's really what I just want to see more of is getting away from telling stories of trauma and stereotypes to people focusing on solutions in our communities and investing directly into those solutions that are already in communities. So I would say the challenges I was prepared for. So I'm not really like it definitely fazed me. But we still need to get over those things so that my org and orgs just like us can keep getting investment, because it's now more than ever important if we're going to move the country forward. COVID caused a lot of adjustments to B360. One, we don't have a budget. So we've maintained on fee for service contracting. So in 2019, we did a great job of going to get contracts. We earned about 435K in contracts that were supposed to support our programming this year, which would mean I would finally be full time. So people know that I do the work of B360, but I'm actually not compensated. Two, to allow us to bring in more full time dirt bike riders. So we would have had at least seven that would have been on full time payroll. And then we typically serve about 1,200 students in a year through contracts and 2 to 3 touch points. And so with the COVID pandemic, that budget was pretty much alleviated, because right when COVID started, that was our season. And so I literally watched all of our contracts be canceled. And so now we're probably at about 33% of recouping that budget. But that's some of the main pain points, is not being able to have the staff that we need to serve students, not having the budget that we need to create free programming for the amount of students we typically would see, not being able to pay and support riders who utilize us as income, and really just not being able to be as, as ingrained in Baltimore as we typically would because of the pandemic, and really wanting people to, like, we would like to win some grants. We would like to have some support so we can keep doing our great work. So I'm confident, most importantly, that we can keep pivoting. So some highlights are, we started a virtual series called the Toolbox, where people can learn more about in-depth details of B360. Like one series featured how do you actually build a dirt bike park, featuring a Black engineer, Greg, who took us through the process of creating a space. We still have done in-person programming even in the middle of a pandemic. And one of our next big projects is to take a bus that will gut out and to create a mobile classroom so we can go into communities. And a big project, which is probably the next big milestone for B360, is for us to have a permanent space right here in Baltimore, where we're trying to get people from both sides of the argument to give to us so we can finally have a space in Baltimore for riders. But think of it more as a facility where people can take classes, fix their bike, repair it, do indoor and outdoor racing. And we want to be able to create jobs and workforce opportunities in that space. My greatest accomplishments with the work is honestly in like the students and young adults that we serve. Like, I'll always tell the same stories about our kids, because I believe, regardless of the awards, accolades, like that stuff is nice. But when they smile and they're happy and their voices are heard, that's the real wins. So I think about the students we first started with when they were in fifth grade and now they're ninth grade. So Daron, Damon, Tony, and Kamaya. The success for me is the fact that they have been able to travel across the country, riding dirt bikes or pairing them, and are really like celebrities in their own right. That when you think of dirt bike riders, you'll see hopefully Daron's face, you'll see Kamaya's face, you'll see Damon, and you'll see Tony. Most recently, they did a campaign with HBO called Why I Ride to really focus on like their individual stories. And so the wins for me with them look like, of course, the typical stuff, which is their iReady test scores increased by 100 points or higher. They came to B360 for the dirt bikes. They stayed for the experiences and want to go into STEM in different career fields, and I'm proud to support them. People choose to focus on all the negative about Baltimore as opposed to talking about how we got here and the ways that people are already moving forward. And so I think the boost needs to happen because, yes, we have a lot of challenges in the city, but yes, we also have a lot of solutions. And I always tell people, innovation is a new word. The one thing that Baltimore people know how to do is survive. And the way that we're surviving is by constantly recreating something to move our communities forward. That if people are going to talk about the problem, what money are you investing into the solution? And that's a boost. And so that's what I really want people to focus on, and why it's pivotal right now is that we can acknowledge the problems all day, but if we're not boosting the solutions, it's kind of no point in recognizing the problems. And so I think boosts like this are important because there's so many people doing the work and so many people that need acknowledgement and investment. And we're one of the orgs, but there's just so many just ready and willing to keep going, but we just need that boost up.